This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hundreds gather across the Nile from Khartoum after deadly clashes. South Sudan President Salva Kiir kicks off a two-day visit to Kenya. And Khalifa Haftar's forces release 6 Turkish detainees in Libya. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. The details on those stories in just a moment, but first, Rama Nyang with the day's business headlines. Rama.
Yes, indeed, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. The OPEC cartel will extend its oil supply cut well past 2019. And senior civil servants in Nigeria may go on strike in a row over insurance cover. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, though, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And let's start in Sudan, where hundreds of people gathered in the city of Omdurman across the River Nile from Khartoum on Monday to protest against the ruling military calling for handover of power to civilians. This comes a day after at least 8 people died in clashes between security services and protesters on Sunday. Members of the crowd came out after residents found the bodies of 3 young men riddled with bullets and dressed in civilian clothes close to the river early in the morning. At least 600 people blocked off the main road leading to the White Nile Bridge, which connects Omdurman to Sudan's capital. This is considered the biggest demonstration since a deadly raid by security forces on a protest camp in central Khartoum 3 weeks ago. Earlier, we spoke to Dr. Mohammed Hussein, a professor of political science at Cairo University, on the political crisis in Sudan.
The demonstrators should continue being in the street or on the street until the military council really accepts their demands and investigates the crimes committed on June the 3rd and try to bring those responsible to justice. They should never leave the street if they wanted to achieve something in the Sudan. They should take notice of what happened in Egypt and in Algeria. Actually, I am concerned for the security of Egypt, which is surrounded by the Sudan to the south, by Libya to the west, by Sinai or the war in terror in the Sinai Peninsula. I am really deeply concerned for Egypt. I am also concerned for the Sudan, which is being divided further and further. I am being concerned for the principle of democracy itself, which people are taking lightheartedly. I am concerned for the human lives. I am deeply concerned for what is going on in the Sudan, which must come to an end. Well, the Transitional Council should refrain from committing atrocities and more crimes, more killing of the innocent Sudanese who are demonstrating, calling for civil rights. They are peaceful demonstrators. They should be treated with respect and with dignity. The military council is really committing atrocities, and they should refrain from doing this. They rely on some regional stakeholders, which is Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates. They are not helping, and I am concerned also for the Arab regional system, which is being further divided into something similar to what was going on during the 50s and the 60s, during the time of Nasser, when the Arab regime was divided into reactionary people, revolutionary people, and so on. Why should these regional stakeholders insisting on siding by the military council, irrespective of or disregarding the peaceful aspirations of the Sudanese people? Well, to get out of the stalemate, the military council must recede, must concede, must defer to the public will of the people as demonstrated in the street. They must listen to the mediation initiated by Ethiopia, which is doing well, and everybody is saying or claiming to having accepting the mediation. However, they are acting differently on the street. The people themselves, the Sudanese people, must learn how to compromise, because democracy is all about compromise, and I don't see people to be compromising. So they should compromise. The military council should listen to reason. The international community should add more pressure on the military council in order to abide by the will of the Sudanese people.
Ethiopia is still investigating a coup attempt in its Amhara region and the assassination of the military chief of staff on the 22nd of June. Hundreds of people already arrested are yet to appear in court as authorities expect to detail more suspects. Coletta Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa.
So far, 255 people have been arrested. 212 of these are from the Amhara region, while 43 are from Addis Ababa. Among those arrested is the spokesperson of the National Movement of Amhara Party, who accuses authorities of mass arrests of the party's supporters and sympathizers. From those arrested in Addis Ababa, 2 machine guns, 27 rifles and several pistols, including bullets and documents, have been seized. Investigations are yet to determine if the Addis Ababa assassination of the military chief of staff and the coup in Amhara are related. Security remains high in the country. At the airport in Addis Ababa, vehicles are being restricted from entry to some points. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia has already appointed a replacement for the fallen military chief of staff. The former chief of national intelligence, Adem Mohammed, takes over as the new chief of staff of the National Defense Forces. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
6 Turks detained in Libya by forces loyal to Commander Khalifa Haftar have been released. This is according to Turkey's foreign ministry. The release comes just a day after Turkey warned the militia of stern action unless they were released immediately. In the meantime, a senior commander of the eastern-based Libyan army says that the army will take over the capital, Tripoli, despite Turkey's support to the UN-backed government. Well, let's get more from CGTN's Adel Mahroui in Cairo. Adel, the LNA has threatened to target more Turkish interests in Libya. How significant are Turkish investments and presence there?
Well, Turkey has a huge investment in Libya. Billions of dollars are invested, not just in one of the troubling side. It has been mainly all over the infrastructure, especially the powers sector. Turkey has about $2.25 billion of investments in electricity production and electricity power plants in Libya. That's beside the trade volume, which has been estimated last year to be around $1.8 billion. That's just a fragment of the volume of trade and investments, Turkish investments in Libya. On the other hand, the number of Libyans visiting Turkey has nearly doubled during last year, reaching around 188,000 Libyans. And therefore, the continuation and the flow of Libyans between the two countries, the open relations in terms of trade and investments is quite integral for Turkey. However, of course, Turkey has most of its investments and most of its dialogue with the government of National Accord in Tripoli, the internationally recognized and backed by the United Nations government led by Faiz al-Sarraj. And this is where the differences come in between the Turkish government from one side and the LNA forces led by General Khalifa Haftar, who is supported by a rival government in the east. And that has been the core conflict in the dispute, as Turkey has been one of the main backers for the GNA against Haftar.
Adel, there is now talk that the Libyan National Army is keen to provoke Turkey into getting involved in the military conflict in Libya in an attempt to divert attention over violations of an arms embargo. What are regional authorities saying about this allegation?
Well, Egypt has been one of the main countries, and those nations allied to Khalifa Haftar have been.
Adel Mahroui for us there in Cairo with that update. Apologies for that. Let's now look at other stories we're following for you this hour and go to Kenya, where South Sudan's President Salva Kiir is in Kenya on a two-day state visit, where he met with his host, President Uhuru Kenyatta, in Nairobi. The two leaders held bilateral talks touching on the revitalized peace agreement, security and trade. CGTN's Robert Nagila has that report.
The Southern Sudanese leader jetted into Kenya early on Monday for a two-day state visit at the invitation of President Uhuru Kenyatta. This meeting comes at a time when South Sudan is in the process of implementing the revitalized peace agreement and is trying to rebuild its economy shattered by the civil war. The agreement, signed in September 2018 by President Salva Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar, brought to an end a brutal civil war that lasted almost 5 years, claiming an estimated 400,000 lives and displacing more than 4 million people. At a briefing, the two leaders reaffirmed their commitment to see the peace agreement fully implemented.
I urge the international community, led by the United Nations and the Troika of the United States, United Kingdom and Italy, to engage strongly in support of the people of the South Sudan as well as her government.
We are delighted to further note that we have received assurances that the government of Kenya will be exerting additional efforts to bolster the smooth implementation of the peace agreement.
The two leaders also agreed on a framework to engage on border security challenges between the two countries. On trade, Kenya offered South Sudan land to construct a dry port to ease movement of goods. Nairobi also proposed to hold its trade expo in South Sudan in November in an effort to boost its economy. Kiir is expected to hold meetings with potential investors and business leaders before he leaves for Juba on Tuesday. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. DRC launches operation against militia groups in the country's north. And 59 years on, Somalia celebrates milestones amid challenges.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed.
And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
From Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
The President of the Democratic Republic of Congo has ordered the army to carry out a large-scale operation against militia groups in the northeast of the country. President Tshisekedi's directive follows the killing of more than 160 people and the displacement of hundreds of others in ethnic clashes in Ituri province. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
Violent clashes between the Lendu and Hema ethnic groups in northeastern DRC have left dozens dead and more than 300,000 people displaced. The UN Refugee Agency says more than 7,000 Congolese have been forced to flee to neighboring Uganda. The DRC President, Felix Tshisekedi, has ordered the Congolese army to conduct a large-scale operation to wipe out the militia groups. The operation will involve the collaboration of UN peacekeepers as well as troops from Rwanda and Uganda. The president was in Ituri province on Sunday to assess the security situation. His visit follows an escalation of fighting between the Lendu and Hema communities in Jugu territory. The two communities have been fighting over land and political representation for years. The joint offensive by the DRC Army and UN peacekeepers will also be launched in Minembwe village in South Kivu province, where fighting has been reported between different armed groups. The unrest in the northeast has occurred as health experts are struggling to stop the spread of Ebola in Ituri province. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Somalia is celebrating Independence Day amid rising challenges facing the society. Insecurity, unemployment and militant attacks continue to remain three challenges facing successful Somali governments. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello attended the celebrations and filed the following story.
It's Independence Day in Somalia, and these young people are here to celebrate alongside their leaders. The day holds a special significance and great importance in the country's history.
Our country has undergone major setbacks in recent years, but we will overcome all this. We are now seeing progress in various fronts, and we will remain optimistic for the future.
We have been through a lot, and we see tangible progress. My message to young people is we should shun tribalism and clanism and work on rebuilding our great country.
In the capital Mogadishu, the country's army raised the Somali flag with its distinct 5-point white star to symbolize the 5 Somali-speaking regions in the Horn of Africa. The event was followed shortly by a dazzling display of fireworks that rocked Mogadishu. The country is celebrating its independence anniversary and the unification of 2 regions previously divided by British and Italian colonialists. 59 years later, the country is facing immense challenges, but that hasn't denied these young people from turning out in their hundreds to celebrate this day.
I believe that Somalia has taken the right path to recovery, and we hope that these celebrations will usher a new year of hope whereby the northern region will join the fold and work alongside the government. We also pray and hope that the current president unites the country.
Somali President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo used the opportunity to rally for unity while urging locals to take part in the reconstruction of the country.
We have lived to see what unity and togetherness can achieve. We've seen what division, tribalism can do to society. The question is, what is the future of Somalia for the next 59 years now? My vision is a united Somalia that welcomes all on board.
The Horn of Africa nation has witnessed the harshest consequences of internal conflict in Africa. In 1991, the central government collapsed, and for almost 3 decades, Somalia had no formal government. Meanwhile, the army is now waging an all-out war against insurgent groups in what has come to be known as the second liberation of Somalia from forces destabilizing the country. Locals now say an end to militant attacks will go a long way in ensuring sustainable peace and progress is achieved for future generations. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Meanwhile, the Economic Community for West African States has adopted a single currency named ECO, which it plans to launch by 2020. ECO was adopted during the 55th Ordinary Session organized by ECOWAS in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. And during the meeting, President Muhammadu Buhari also handed over the chairmanship of the organization to Nigeria's President Mahamadou Issoufou. The summit focused on security, political stability, and socio-economic development in Africa. Across the African continent, more countries are clamping down on single-use plastics. Kenya is now extending the orders to ban their use in beaches, national parks, forests and conservation areas effective June the 5th, 2020. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moi takes a look at the growing list of countries taking on the environmental issue.
Africa is taking the plastic problem very seriously. More than 15 countries on the continent have either banned them completely or charged a tax on them. Some of the countries in Africa that have bans or taxes in place include the following. Tanzania officially announced a ban on the entry of all plastic carrier bags into its territory, effective 1st June 2019. All plastic carrier bags, regardless of their thickness, is prohibited from being imported, exported, manufactured, sold, stored, supplied and used in mainland Tanzania. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta announced a ban on single-use plastics in beaches, national parks, forest and conservation areas. The ban will take effect on June 5th, 2020. The production and use of plastic bags became a criminal offense in Mali on December 31st, 2013, making Africa the leading continent in the global crackdown on plastic bags. In 2012, Cameroon formally banned the use of non-biodegradable plastics in the country. The ban made the importing, trading, and commercial use of plastic bags a criminal offense. Exceptions were made for plastics that are essential for health and hygiene. In 2008, the small East African nation of 12 million people instituted a national ban on non-biodegradable plastic bags. The government introduced amendments to the law banning plastic bags. The ban on use of plastics or single-use plastics in Africa is now minimizing the creation of waste, much of which drifts and ends up in the world's oceans. In places without any such prohibitions, waste continues to be a major problem. Now, despite efforts to minimize and ban single-use plastics, solutions are often met with resistance from business, government or civil society due to the intended and unintended consequences, leaving many questioning the most appropriate solution to reducing the leakage. Back to you.
Daniel Arap Moi on Africa's plastic ban. Now, plastic pollution is threatening South Africa's biodiversity along the country's coastline. The new environmental ministerial team is now looking at all kinds of new measures to curb the problem, including casting a much wider ban of plastics in public spaces. CGTN's Travers Andrews has this report.
It's no secret that Cape Town has developed a plastic pollution problem, which has been made worse by the thousands of tons of water bottles left over from the drought. It's presented a very unique problem. On the one hand, it threatens the environment and biodiversity, and on the other, it's creating new opportunities which could potentially put food on the table for some.
The recycling industry has enormous potential to create jobs. It's very underdeveloped. We tend to think about it as just being people who, you know, rubbish pickers, whereas I think that there's enormous potential there in terms of waste recycling.
The government, though, has tried to curb single-use plastic pollution for many years now, including charging a levy for every carry bag that is bought from a store. Beverage and bottling companies have also set up their own industry body called PETCO, which connects recyclers to collectors. And that initiative has shown to be a great success in reducing the amount of bottles being dumped.
We are already recycling roughly 2/3 of the plastic, of the PET that is put into the marketplace. Now, this model that has been very successful in South Africa is now being replicated to Kenya and other countries in the continent.
One of the single largest plastic pollution concerns, though, is the threat it poses to marine biodiversity, including animals such as fish and seabirds. Even though South Africans are estimated to use around 30 to 40 kilograms of plastics a year, which is roughly 1/3 of what is used in the US, a lot of that still ends up here in the canal system and eventually into the ocean. Which is why the government is stepping in with its own plan to prevent the ocean from continuing to look like this.
We have a program we call Source to Sea, which is a whole program that involves working on riverbeds and waterways so that you prevent the plastic from getting to the sea in the first place. And that's obviously a very important activity.
Once Parliament reconvenes, the Environmental Department is also expected to host strategic meetings on new measures needed to fight plastic pollution. But whether that will lead to a ban on single plastic use remains to be seen. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
To health matters now, and detecting and removing precancerous polyps is known to be the gold standard in preventing colon cancer. And it seems a breakthrough is seen in this area. Chinese doctors came up with the idea of creating an AI system to increase the detection rate of colorectal polyps, which are often the precursors to cancer. They enlisted researchers from Harvard University Medical School, among others, in their project. CGTN's Wei Ling Tang has more from Sichuan province, where this study originated and where the first set of randomized controlled trials was carried out.
A clinical trial in a real setting. A colonoscopy procedure is underway. Dr. Wang Pu is on the hunt for any abnormalities, including polyps. A blue box and an alarm alert him to a possible polyp. And another one. Here, Dr. Wang is assisted by a real-time automatic polyp detection system. In a routine colonoscopy, he will be relying solely on his eyes.
The value of the AI system is for the easy-to-miss polyps. For example, some polyps are partially occluded by a colon fold or feces or some fluid, and some polyps are very flat and without a clear boundary. So with the help of this AI system, we can reduce the misdiagnosis of such polyps.
Medical experts say while most polyps are benign, a subtype known as adenomas can eventually become cancerous. And in most cases, because they don't trigger any early symptoms, it's hard to know if you've developed them. And this is why it's all the more crucial to get your screening done. If a biopsy confirms the polyps are adenomas, they can be removed promptly. Dr. Wang was the first author of this study, along with Chinese doctors from the Sichuan Academy of Medical Sciences, researchers from Harvard Medical School, and others. The first randomized controlled experiment showed an increase of adenoma detection rate by almost 50%. Evidence has shown that an increase in the adenoma detection rate is associated with the decrease of interval cancers, those detected within 12 months of screening. In this study, the higher detection rate was mainly due to smaller adenomas. Dr. Wang explains why this is important.
Everyone knows that smaller polyps bears less possibility to transform to cancer. But I want to say that even the risk for each polyps is low. The number is very huge. So the overall expected cancer incidence is non-negligible. So this system has some significance for the ultimate goal to reduce the interval cancer.
Dr. Liu Xiaogang, a co-author of the study, has been in this line for 25 years. He hails this AI system as unprecedented and a breakthrough in the field of gastroenterology.
If my physical strength isn't good, my productivity and accuracy in performing an endoscopy would be different in the morning and afternoon. Second, my experience 10 years ago and now are different. Also, if patients don't prepare well for a scope, even if I want to be on the lookout for polyps, I may not find them. So only by increasing detection rates can we reduce the country's increase in large intestinal diseases.
Dr. Liu did say that the AI system presently over-detects on anything that looks like a polyp. So next steps include to further train the system to reduce instances of false positives, as well as to look into the slight delay of the system with the goal of long-distance use. In the meantime, there are plans to expand the sample size of this study.
We may apply the study to a few other centers to include doctors at the county and grassroots level to take on this research. If we can increase their capabilities to increase the detection rate of adenomatous polyps, we can benefit more patients.
A blind control was used to reduce operational bias. Endoscopists did not know they were using an AI system. Meanwhile, a tandem study with a back-to-back procedure of a routine and an AI-assisted colonoscopy is in the works. All these are steps to further validate the effectiveness of the system. As the old saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Wei Lintang, CGTN, Chengdu City in Sichuan Province.
Well, let's now go to Ramanyang for a look at the day's business headlines.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. The OPEC cartel will extend oil supply cuts well past the end of 2019. And senior civil servants in Nigeria may go on strike due to a row over insurance cover.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor, to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's start with the energy sector. OPEC and its allies are set to extend oil supply cuts right until the end of 2019 and probably beyond that too. Now, OPEC has been reducing oil output fairly steadily since 2017 to prevent prices from sliding amid soaring output from the United States. Now, recently the US in fact demanded that Saudi Arabia should actually increase output to compensate for much lower exports from Iran. This comes after Iran was hit by fresh unilateral sanctions by the United States over its nuclear program. Reuters says that the Brent crude benchmark has now gone up by 25% since the start of the year, but crude prices could stall due to a slow global economy and the flooding of US oil in markets. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, to use OPEC's formal name, are meeting to discuss supply cuts amid a surge in US output.
We acknowledge and welcome the recent expression of commitment by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Russian Federation following the meeting of the G20 in Osaka, Japan, to continue the declaration of cooperation for a further 9 months. Nigeria strongly endorses this commendable commitment and supports this position. We believe that an extension of 9 months is preferable to 6 months, as it offers greater certainty to the market, thereby reducing market volatility.
Now, in Nigeria, senior civil servants have threatened to go on strike within the next week. They want the government to implement an insurance scheme for their members. CGTN's Phil Ihaza has this report from Abuja.
The nationwide strike will affect major activities of various public sectors controlled by the government, including education, health and agriculture. The Association of Senior Civil Servants of Nigeria says the National Insurance Commission has failed to comply with the agreement they made last August 2018 to provide insurance coverage for all its members across the country. The association is a top member of the country's Trade Union Congress and has the responsibility of overseeing the welfare of over 80,000 senior employees of the federal and state government. The group says the insurance coverage agreement is meant to cover for the risks and financial losses Nigeria's senior civil servants may suffer as a result of economic instability in the country. The Nigerian government says it is already in negotiation with the senior civil servants to prevent the looming strike. However, the senior civil servant group says the current negotiation will be stopped and an indefinite strike will begin if their request is not granted within the next week. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari in April this year signed a new increased minimum wage into law and promised a better life for Nigeria's civil servants. Phil Ihaza, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
On to East Africa now. Safaricom's Chief Executive Officer Bob Collymore has passed on. He succumbed after nearly 2 years of a battle with cancer. Shares in East Africa's most profitable company were actually relatively steady at the Nairobi Securities Exchange in the wake of the announcement of his death this morning. Here's CGTN's Penina Karibe with that story.
Safaricom Chief Executive Officer Bob Collymore died at his home after battling with acute myeloid leukemia. As CEO of Safaricom, the telco has posted record profits. It recently declared a record 19.9% increase in net income and a $619 million profit. In 2017, East Africa's most profitable firm was thrown into confusion after he took sudden leave after falling ill. After undergoing treatment, he announced his return in May 2019. Following news of his death, Twitter was flooded with condolence messages from well-wishers, including the Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta and peers in the industry. Until his demise, he was the longest-serving CEO of the telecom firm, having taken over from his predecessor Michael Joseph in 2010. Safaricom shares fell by 2.7% when markets opened on Monday following his death. Collymore, who was 61 years old, was due to step down in August after 9 years at the helm, during which time Safaricom's shares price rose by more than 400%.
Now, the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang has met with the World Economic Forum Chairman Klaus Schwab at the summer Davos Economic Forum in Dalian. Li Keqiang says China aims to deepen its partnership with the WEF to uphold multilateralism and free trade. The summer Davos event opens today with a theme of Leadership 4.0, succeeding in a new era of globalization. Now, the event includes meetings on global cybersecurity issues, China's economic outlook, even self-driving cars. More than 1,900 people from over 100 countries are attending the event. Now, the former Deputy Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Zhu Min, also spoke to CGTN during the summer Davos event about his thoughts concerning the dollar's hegemony, especially in the wake of Facebook's Libra virtual currency.
There's no governance mechanism that puts scrutiny on the US dollar. That's why the dollar's credibility remains intact. Also, the US financial markets are the biggest in the world, and you have to use the dollar for transactions. So the dollar's position in the global market increased rather than decreased after the financial crisis. Now here comes Facebook's Libra plan, where they shake up global monetary policy and break the dollar hegemony. That remains to be seen. There's still not enough transparency around its governance framework, so a lot remains to be done, but it will bring some shock to the market.
Now, Summer Davos isn't just about discussion sessions and aggressive platform discussions, but it's also a venue for high-tech displays as well. Earlier on, Kwai Shui Hao also checked out some of the displays at the venue.
Standing in front of the camera to get my face scanned for a few seconds. Here it comes, all the data about me. Gender, age, race, and even mood.
The system scans your face and compares your face to a large database of other faces that have been tagged according to a set of personality attributes and makes a correlation to see how much your face looks like all the other faces.
Well, the computation results of the biometric mirror are quite disappointing. For instance, it says I have low kindness and high aggressiveness. Well, definitely not the way I think of myself. Professor Vetter says these round outcomes are a cautionary tale that technologies like AI and machine learning are far from being perfect, and round data can be abused for bad purposes.
So if you're matched to a terrorist face, then you are ascribed attributes of being like a terrorist. That has major consequences to how then others judge you.
And this is what the future hospital looks like. Surgeries being performed by doctors and robots. The 4 robotic arms are executing orders from the surgeon. This surgical robot is now applied to extracting tumors and killing cancer cells.
The biggest advantage of the system is that it assists surgeons to perform minimally invasive surgery. That means patients can only have 4 small holes on their bodies, and thus they can have less blood loss and less chances of infections and complications.
Finally, this booth called Digital Mimic gives those who aspire to be celebrities a chance. Your face can be changed to Bruce Lee, Neil Armstrong, Audrey Hepburn, you name it.
Basically, we take one single input image and create different expressions from that image, so we can basically put someone else's face onto someone else.
Why is it dangerous?
Because with this technology, you can create fake news, fake videos that look realistic.
These tech displays are not just stunts of the show. They're trying to encourage participants to think deeper about technology, how it is shaping our lives, and what ramifications it may have for our future. CGTN, Dalian, Liaoning Province.
Leaders of the European Union have gathered in Brussels to decide on the body's new leadership roles. Now, the bloc has to replace the EU Council President and the President of the EU Commission, among other roles. Here's CGTN's Mariam Zaidi with the latest.
This latest emergency summit follows on from a 2-day summit from just over a week ago in Brussels, where EU leaders could not find a consensus or a qualified majority for any of those nominees for the EU top jobs up for grabs. And those are, of course, the presidencies of the European Council, Commission, European Central Bank and the EU Foreign Affairs Chief. Now, one of the main reasons why EU leaders are having such a tough time is because they want to reflect the democratic will of the people as exercised in the May EU parliamentary elections, and they also want to ensure a gender balance. Now, this is what Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel had to say when she arrived at the summit.
As things are going, the discussions won't be very easy, to put it mildly. Anyhow, the European Parliament, with 2 big factions, is fixated on the principle of top candidates, and yet the biggest force, the European People's Party, has no majority in the European Parliament, and so European Council President Donald Tusk will have a difficult task today, and we will try to be constructive.
The race to replace Jean-Claude Juncker, the EU Commission President, is possibly one of the most contested jobs to fill. Now, the candidates proposed by the parties of the EU Parliament didn't get a majority at the last summit, but what we're hearing tonight is that the Socialist and Liberal candidates seem to have some forward momentum at this summit. But the night, of course, is young and all could change. But here's a fun fact. Every day that an EU summit is held, it costs the EU taxpayer €450,000. So the cost of indecision does not come cheap. And if no decision comes at this summit, the European Parliament, who expect to choose their president in Strasbourg on Wednesday, well, they may need to hold off on their plans. Mariam Zaidi, CGTN, Brussels.
All right, then I'll leave it there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour, though. We'll be focusing on ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. The 15 countries have decided to adopt a flexible forex regime in order to boost trade. But there's also a bit more coming up, including a new currency. We'll have the details on that and lots more coming your way at 1800 GMT. For now, though, back to Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And to stay with us here on Africa Live, we still have more news for you on the program. Here's what's ahead. So, does it honor women or objectify them? The raging debate about dowry in Africa.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Dowry has been a subject of intense debate across Africa. There are those who can afford it, others cannot. Then there are those who feel that it objectifies women. Debate has extended to whether love has been sacrificed at the altar of material gain. So should dowry be paid or not? CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more from South Africa.
Dowry or lobola, as it is known here in South Africa, is an age-old custom that involves the transfer of cattle from the prospective husband to the family of his prospective bride. The main function of this custom is to offer a token of appreciation to the parents of the bride-to-be for raising her. Paying lobola, dowry or bride price is a custom in many parts of the continent, and calculating it is steeped in tradition. Over the years, this tradition of paying lobola has moved into the 21st century. Instead of transfer of cattle, the transaction is now cash-based. Critics say it commoditizes women, thus disempowering them.
It's not that, it's a cultural symbolism that sort of puts two families together, a coming together of two families. That acknowledges that this is who we are now, we're creating a new family.
But many maintain that the custom has the power to forge bonds.
So when person A meets person B, African culture acknowledges that person A and person B each are part of a system. And in fact, the rituals that are involved in lobola negotiations are bringing those two systems together, acknowledging that we are stronger working together than when we work as individuals. And I think that is the beauty of the practice.
Ramufuku asserts, though, that this custom can still be practiced without the exchange of money.
Families can come together without the man or the woman paying money. In fact, you can zero rate that. You can still have all the rituals of exchanging gifts, of families coming together, blessing, the people who want to get married, and decide that, in fact, it is going to be, from a commercial point of view, a zero game. In fact, both parents can decide to exchange gifts or gift the two newlyweds.
This custom has, however, often had unfavorable results. Some demands for dowry have seen weddings called off.
Some demands for dowry have proven to be a recipe for turmoil in many marriages as the couples grapple with the debt that they accrued while seeking funds for the dowry.
So that can and does create turmoil, because then how do they get married? Because more often than not, the lobola comes in before the marriage ceremony happens, because the families tend to insist that there should be lobola first before the marriage ceremony. They're already starting on the back foot, because either they've had to borrow, the husband has had to borrow, or they've had to borrow from somewhere.
The practice remains an intrinsic part of getting married for many South Africans. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
In Tunisia, 2 public broadcasters are set to air Chinese programs, documentaries and series presenting China's rich and diverse culture to the Tunisian public. Over 10 million Tunisians will discover Chinese television productions translated into Arabic.
A high-level media delegation from China has visited the Tunisian public television. Both sides agreed on broadcasting Chinese programs on the 2 public channels, Wataniya 1 and Wataniya 2, during the China TV Week.
We believe that the Chinese culture is universal. We must learn about each other's cultures. Despite the geographic distance, our people's lives and ways of thinking are very close, especially the younger generations. Chinese movies and series have been welcomed by the youth here because they have the same dreams and interests as the youth in China.
I'm very happy to see China TV Week on the national Tunisian television. With the good Chinese programs, we can better present China to the Tunisian public.
China is the special guest of Arab countries at the Arab States Broadcasting Union ASBU Festival. The international event was held at Culture City in Tunis, with the participation of 70 organizations and media outlets.
The China Day at the festival was an opportunity for the Arab and Tunisian audience to meet Chinese directors, actors and professionals. Tunisia and China are strengthening their cooperation in the media and artistic fields.
Tunisians have become familiar with Chinese names, cities and traditions after watching translated documentaries and series.
Chinese culture is extraordinary. I've discovered it on TV. China is a great nation and civilization.
I've learned from Chinese programs the culture of discipline, hard work and creativity.
Tunisian and Chinese officials have agreed on exchanging competences and developing co-production between the Tunisian and Chinese public televisions. Cultural exchange is among the main aspects of China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, which focuses on cultural rapprochement between China and the world.
Many Tunisians who have been watching Chinese TV programs translated into Arabic on their national television and on social networks have called on their public broadcaster to translate Chinese TV productions into the local Tunisian dialects in order to reach a broader audience in the North African country. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Kenya and Senegal face off in the battle for direct qualification ticket to the Africa Cup of Nations last 16.
Africa, where champions are made.